would like to welcome everyone this morning to the second lecture in a series sponsored by Boston University's Humanities Foundation and organized by the Department of Anthropology. For those of you who attended the first lecture, you know in the fall we had Dr. Ahmed Shakur as our initial speaker. And today we have as our second speaker a gentleman of equal prominence and whose ideas are equally exciting as Dr. Shakur's. He comes to us actually in terms of where he's coming from us immediately speaking. He's coming from Chicago and has only been in Boston for about 10 hours, I think, 10 or 11 hours. He was in Chicago lecture yesterday. And he will be participating in a conference this weekend at the Harvard Law School. And the subject of that conference is the Islamic marriage contract. And I've talked to some of you about this. This looks to be a very, very interesting and important conference. And I'm going to be participating over there and listening to a different talk and looking forward to that as well. But our guest, Dr. Nasser Abou-Zaid, is presently visiting professor at Leiden University in the Netherlands. But his permanent academic post is in Cairo, at the University of Cairo, where he's professor of Islamic studies. As some of you know, his writings, which many people have applauded for their profound scholarly quality and for their penetrating insights on Islam, became the focus for radical Islamists a few years ago. And unfortunately, they've made our guest a subject of a rather unfortunate incident in which he and his wife were basically taken to court because of the quality of his writings. And perhaps if some of you are interested in this case during the questions and answers, you might address some of your questions to Dr. Abou-Zaid. But it gives me great pleasure to welcome a man of great prominence. This is the first time I've met him, but we have many mutual friends. And I know from mutual friends that this is not only a man of outstanding intellectual quality, but a man of incredible integrity and moral character. And it makes me doubly pleased, therefore, to welcome him here to Boston University as a speaker in our series, Founding Autocracy. Thank you very much for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Well, in every lecture, every public lecture, I, of course, prepare text. This is usual for people who are in the academic circle. But sometimes I feel the text will keep me away from communicating the audience. So let me try to communicate what I have written in a very formal way, to communicate this in informal way, in a narrative story. Some personal aspect will be mixed with some academic and intellectual history. Because it's very important to introduce myself and to introduce to you how I came across different stages of development and my way of thinking about my religion, about Islam, about my country, about my academic life. When I started my career after graduating from Cairo University in 1972, I graduated with a very high honor degree. So I was appointed directly as an assistant teacher in the university. I was planning to work in literary criticism, being aware of the danger of working in Islamic studies with any kind of new methodology, or trying to raise other questions than the traditional questions. But anyway, the Department of Arabic, from which I graduated, had a problem. The chair of Islamic studies was vacant for more than, let me see, more than 70 years. Why? Why this specific chair of Islamic studies was vacant? Because the last student who made his PhD in Islamic studies faced problems which ended in firing him from the university and making everyone afraid to take Islamic studies. So Islamic studies was subject to anyone who would like to teach Quran. Okay? And teaching Islamic studies during these 70 years was taken as some sort of blessing, some sort of devotion, not an academic way of teaching the student. So the department decided that it is time to have the new appointed assistant teacher to be in Islamic studies. I refused. Not because I'm against Islamic studies, but because I know what happened some 70 years ago. I know the whole story, and I have read the book, which was a PhD thesis and was refuted by the university, and how the man who was alive at that time suffered being away from his university, being away of the academic life, and he found some other jobs. But he didn't stop to write Islamic studies. But anyway, lastly, it was, either to work Islamic studies or to find other job than being in the teaching in the university. So I decided, well, I'll take something in between traditional Islamic studies and literary criticism. So if someone asked me, I said, well, no, I'm a literary critic. But in fact, I was in the heart of Islamic studies. So I took in my master thesis the problem of the metaphor in the Quran. So the metaphor would connect me to linguistics and literary studies, but in the Quran, this is Islamic studies, the notion of metaphor in the Quran by the Mu'tazilites. The Mu'tazilites is the rational theologian movement which started in the history of Islamic thought in the 8th century. Let me give you some information about those Mu'tazilites or rational theologians whom I studied their notion of metaphor in the Quran in my master thesis. The Mu'tazilites' theory, for example, let me just give some more. Okay. Mu'tazilism, this is the Arabic thing of this rational theology. Mu'tazilism did not begin as an intellectual exercise, but rather it evolved out of the struggle of the Abbasids against the Umayyads. So if you have some idea about the history, there was the Umayyads. The Umayyad dynasty was absolutely Arabic dynasty, very sincere to the Arabic tradition, against non-Arab. So the Abbasid was a new movement trying to integrate non-Arab with Arab. So it was some sort of modernity at that time. Let's have the term modernity in the traditional text. Modernity as opposed to traditionalism. So the Mu'tazilites came about during that period of struggle between the Umayyads and Abbasids. The idea, for example, of divine predetermination, Jabr, or Qadar, was the theological expression of the Umayyad absolute political rule. The Umayyad, they came to power through military power, to the Caliphate. So in order to justify their regime, they used the notion of Jabr, the notion of predestination. They said, well, God wanted us to be a ruler. So if it wasn't God's will, we wouldn't have succeeded to rule you. So they use this predestination, Jabr al-Qadar, as a theological expression for their absolute political rule. The Mu'tazilites insisted on human free will, al-ikhtiyar, or at least on the illegitimacy of making God responsible for human sin. So the Umayyad system was considered as a very bad system. So making God responsible for this system, it would be like insulting God. This was the Mu'tazilite idea. Another reason for the Mu'tazilite strong rationalistic stance was that they were forced to defend Islam against other religions. Their argument had to be rationally sound to be accepted. Hence, their interest in the Aristotelian laws of logic. At the time, the main school of philosophical speculation. In their struggle, the Mu'tazilites developed three major epistemological principles, which embodied the rational understanding of the world, man, God, and his revelation. And that's exactly the first ever reforming movement in Islam, the first modernizing thought. Maybe, well, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I say this is the first enlightenment movement in Islamic thought. The first principle was that knowledge emanates from this world. It is only possible to speak about the other, invisible world, on the basis of evidence furnished by the reality of the seen world. So man starts from here, and then he can move from here to understand there, the metaphysical world. God and his attributes can only be known by reflection and by acquired knowledge, not by direct or revealed knowledge. So to know God is not to go to the Quran. To know God, it's a rational direction. It's a rational acquired knowledge. And then the Quran will approve this knowledge. If there is any contradiction as it's coming, then the rational understanding should be the rule for interpreting the Quran itself. The second principle was that all mankind, and this is very important, is equally endowed with the vital benefit of knowledge. All mankind, regardless of color, of culture, of language. And they call this a necessary intellect. The extent of knowledge depends on the capability to move by an act of reflection from the level of necessary knowledge to the level of acquired knowledge. So they have this differentiation between necessary knowledge, which all the people are equal. All the people have this necessary knowledge. God has given it to everyone. Okay. Acquired knowledge is how every individual develops this necessary knowledge by way of thinking. The third epistemological principle, a duty imposed by God, and therefore the ultimate objective of intellectual reflection was that to know God. The Mu'tazilites argued that God provided man with necessary intellect that enables him to reflect and acquire true knowledge of the divine, independent of revelation. That's very important. And this view assumes a harmony between rational acquired knowledge and divine revelation. Mu'tazilite theology was an attempt to construct a permanent synthesis between human intellect and revelation. In a situation of apparent contradiction, the data of revelation were to be interpreted by human reflection. And here comes a metaphor. So whatever apparent contradiction between what is perceived by rational reflection and what is mentioned in the Quran should be interpreted as metaphorical. Metaphor, allegory, and other figures of speech. The intellectual opponents of the Mu'tazilites were the traditionalists who upheld the literal interpretation of all Quranic verses to the extent that they affirmed the existential reality of all divine attributes all eschatological images, and even the idea that God can be seen by human eyes. The Mu'tazilites objected to their idea that the literal interpretation of the holy text was a religious duty. They objected to that, regarding it as an obstacle to the fulfillment of mankind's destiny. They believed that God himself imposed on mankind the duty to acquire real knowledge by using these rational faculties. This background of the Mu'tazilites explains the Mu'tazilites' theory of the relation between man, language, and holy text. They concentrated on man as the addressee of the text and its teaching, and regarded Quranic texts as unused texts in plural, as created action, not the eternal verbal accounts of God. Well, this is a very delicate question. If the Quran is created, so it is not eternal by God himself, or is as eternal as God himself. And of course we can understand whoever believes the Quran as eternal would stick to the literal meaning. Every letter would count. Any metaphorical explanation will not be accepted. Those who accept the idea that the Quran is created, so they apply language, method, linguistic method to understanding the Quran. Anyway, this very problematic question about the eternity of the Quran and the createdness of the Quran was solved by the interference of the political authority. And here, the beginning of mixing politics and religion in Islamic history. A caliph, an Abbasid caliph, was thought that he was a very rational. He wanted to enforce the ideas of the Mu'tazilites, the rational ideas, by the power of the state on other groups and persecute it. And this was the age of Inquisition. And you can understand how the majority of the people react against this rationality imposed by the state. But later on, another caliph within the same system was against rationalism. So we imposed the idea of traditionalism on the public and persecuted the rational thinker. I think from that point in history, this was in the 3rd century. Politics had been part of the intellectual debate about religious issue, and so far, till now, it is the problem of the Muslim world. Governments, political regime, they have all their ideology, and they would impose their ideology on the people. This was my master dissertation about the metaphor in the Quran, and I came to the conclusion, and this is which led me to the second question of my life. The conclusion was that the Mu'tazilites have certain ideology, pretext ideology, and they wanted to get some proof from the text to their ideology. So they were very, very intelligent. They were very, very talented, and they used a specific Quranic verse, which say that the Quran includes ambiguous verses and clear verses. But the ambiguous verses should be understood in relation to the clear verses. The Quran did not indicate exactly what the ambiguous verses are and what the clear verses are. So even this statement of the Quran is ambiguous in itself. But the Mu'tazilites was very intelligent. Whatever they find in the Quran to contradict their own pretext ideology, they consider as ambiguous. So a metaphorical explanation was presented. Whatever is in agreement with their pretext ideology is clear. So it doesn't need to be metaphorically explained. The opponents of the Mu'tazilites used the same method. And here they took what the Mu'tazilites considered as clear Their opponent said this is ambiguous, so it needs interpretation. What was ambiguous for the Mu'tazilites was for their opponents clear. So it was like a semantic game based on the duality, ambiguity, and clarity in the Quran. So I came to the conclusion in this early thesis that the Quran became a field of war, a battlefield between all Muslims. So every group can easily find what they want if they say, well, this is ambiguous, this is clear. And from this moment, I thought, well, why don't I investigate the question outside theology? Why don't I go to mysticism? And I thought mysticism as a spiritual maneuver, spiritual understanding of religion might be void of this political ideology that interfered with the Mu'tazilites and their opponents. So I studied a very famous mystic, Sufi. His name is Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. He lived in Andalusia in Spain. And Muhyiddin ibn Arabi tried to understand the Quran in a very, very open way, to the extent that he allowed all knowledge from Aristotle to his age to be contained in the Quran by way of how do you read the Quran. So in fact, he made the Quran a very open text that contained all kinds of knowledge: Christianity, Judaism, even paganism. I mean, worshipping idols. Ibn Arabi would say, well, anyone who is worshipping an idol, he doesn't really believe that the idol is God, but he believes that there is something divine in this idol. So divinity is there. Ibn Arabi introduced what you can say the religion of love. He has a very lovely poem